Guys, it's Fonzie with DipYourCar.com, world famous peelable auto paint. Now with Plasti Dip and DipYourCar products being so user friendly and having everyone use them from amateurs all the way up to professionals, what comes along with a product that is that user friendly with that wide of a user base? Mistakes. Mistakes are going to happen. It happens to everyone. Now, one of the most devastating mistakes that you can have when spraying your car is building up too much product too fast in one spot and getting a drip or a run. Now, almost everyone who's used Plasti Dip knows that getting a solid drip or run on the panel of, say, the side of your door when you're spraying your car, there's almost no turning back. You pretty much got to peel that panel and start over. Or do you? Got a couple options. I'm going to walk you through them right now. Stick around. Now what I have here is a test hood, which is going to simulate the side panel of a door on a car. Vertical surfaces are where you're going to get the majority of your drips or runs because gravity is going to pull any extra product down and it's going to collect together. Now this is a pretty standard drip or run here. We've got 4 coats of PDS and we intentionally created an area where we concentrated too much product, and of course the product couldn't hold on, it couldn't stick, and it sagged down into a pretty nasty area, and you'll get a close-up for you in just a moment. Now if this was the side of your car and you messed up, say you clipped the side mirror with your gun and it stuck the gun in one spot too long, or you weren't paying attention, or maybe you double passed over the same spot and you ended up getting a drip or a run like this, let's take a look at what your options are. You could think, well, maybe it'll level itself out and maybe I can just spray over it. Well, I'll tell you right now that you can't. Once you build up too much product in one spot, when you go over it, that product is just going to mimic the texture or whatever obstruction is underneath. You're going to see that run all the way up to the last coat. So spraying over it, cross it off the list. You may think to yourself, well, maybe I can use some solvent with maybe a glove or even some Plasti Dip and work this area down, smooth it out. Now that may work on tears and smoothing things out like that on small surfaces like wheels or something. But let me tell you what's going to happen when you bring a solvent to something like this. That run, the main area of a run, essentially what you see is a very concentrated, thick ribbon of product that's built up there. That run, that ridge, if you will, is much thicker and much denser than the surrounding dip on either side. If you bring some solvent into that and try and smooth it all out, what you're going to do is you're going to bring the material down across the board and you're going to go right through most of the time the thinner Plasti Dip that's above, below, or to the side of the run, and that ridge is going to stay there and it's going to remain. Bringing solvent to this panel is probably going to end up with you respraying it. So using a solvent to thin it out may help a little bit, especially if you're careful. Definitely not going to be a full effective solution. So what can we do? Well, dipping your car does differ from painting your car in a lot of ways, but there are some things that they share. The idea here is you've got a run, which is a buildup of too much product. What you want to do to remedy that is remove the excess product. So just like with a painting mentality, we're going to come in, we're going to sand away, we're going to wet sand away, concentrating on this ridge and any of the ugly areas here, bring it down level just enough so that when we bring in our next coat and we pass over it, we're going to be able to blend it all in. Let me show you how to do it step by step. Check. Now you get to see a nice up-close look at what we're dealing with. Now this, as far as runs go, is a pretty ugly situation because not only do we have our ridge down here, but we have some oxidation up here where the product was trying to flash and release and it was too thick to do so. Got a lot of waves. So what we're going to work on not only is this ridge, but this entire area, because we want to smooth it out and we want our next coat of black PDS as we move through our project to cover this up and essentially mask any of our problem. Now what we're going to be working with today is something that's readily available. This is 3M Automotive wet or dry sanding paper. I like to use 600 grit. You can go a little bit above that to 800, a little below that to 400 if you want. 600, as far as what I find, is what works really well. We're not removing a ton of material. We don't want to dig too deep, but also we don't want to be here all day. Sanding Plasti Dip is a lot different than sanding automotive paint or clear coat. It's its own unique situation. So here are some guidelines that you want to follow if you're going to be using this tutorial. You want to make sure that if you encounter a drip or a run, that you let it dry for a minimum of 2 hours. You can't sand Plasti Dip if it's still wet or if it's still flashing. It's too goopy, and you're going to end up creating some kind of a situation where it's going to be peeling and respraying is going to be your only option. So 2 hour minimum. But with that said, the longer you can wait, the better. Dipping your car is a very serious project. You want it to come out perfect, or as close to perfect as you can. This is a car that you're going to be driving around, and maybe it's for a customer, maybe it's for yourself, and you want the end result to be something you're proud of. So spending the extra time to get it done right is definitely worth it. So a minimum of 2 hour dry time, the longer the better. This has been drying just about 3 hours or so. We're going to come in and start attacking it. The other materials that you need other than sandpaper is we use DipYourCar's pre-dip spray. This is what we're going to be using to lubricate our wet sanding, and then a microfiber towel. Now we want to focus on one area at a time. I like to focus on the ridge first because that has the most material. That's the highest point that we want to bring down. Once we start bringing that down, we can work our way around. Now if you didn't have all this ugly waviness above and below, you can just focus on the ridge and that'll be fine. But we want to try and blend this all in because we're going to come in with another coat of black PDS and try and cover it all up. So you're going to take a nice little square of your 600 grit, spritz it a little bit with the pre-dip, spritz the area with the pre-dip, and then just start slow. Follow the ridge, go back and forth. Don't try and get it all done quickly. This is not about being quick. This is about saving your butt. The better of a job you do here, the less work you'll have to do to finish the project. Spending extra time to sand this down is usually 9 times out of 10 going to be less work and take less time than peeling and respraying all over again. Nobody wants to peel and respray, trust me. So do just a little bit up and down the ridge, and after just a little bit, stop, wipe it off. You want to see how much material you're taking off, depending on how many coats is there, depending on how thick your coats are, depending on how thick your ridge is, determines how long it's going to take it away. So you want to try and educate yourself on how much material is coming off. So right now off the bat, let the pre-dip dry so you can get a good look. We've already started taking down a fair amount of material. It's not about visual, it's about the feel and the touch. It's going to look one way, but how does it feel? Sometimes it's going to look like the ridge is completely gone, but you can still feel it with your fingers. You need to continue. Other times it looks like, man, I haven't gotten this flat yet, but when you feel it with your fingers, it's completely gone. You can start seeing where the light parts are. That's where our high points are. And we don't want to go down to where it's completely flat, because again, this is only 4 coats of Plasti Dip, and we don't want to go down to the OEM paint. Another rule of thumb here, you really can't use this technique unless you're at least 3 coats of Plasti Dip in. Don't try it on 1, don't try it on 2, because chances are you're going to burn through it and get down to the OEM paint. So we're going to go a little bit more in and then check it again. As you continue to go, if it starts to feel dry and it starts to feel sticky or grippy, re-wet it. Because I promise you one thing, if you go too long and you're not paying attention, what's going to happen is you're going to catch some of the Plasti Dip, and because it's a soft substance and it's not like paint, it's going to roll up and away. Once it rolls away from the OEM paint, now you're looking way past a repair job and you're looking at a respray job. So I'm going to follow this ridge again. Just focusing on removing that ridge material. Let's check it again. We're nice and safe. We're nowhere near the OEM paint. We're bringing that ridge down. I can still feel it just a little bit with my fingertips. Now what I'm going to start doing, as the ridge is now at the same level as some of these other wavy high points, now I'm going to start focusing on this entire area. We want to bring this whole area down so that the high points are really kind of even with the rest of the material. Very light pressure. I'm not pushing hard at all. Just the weight of my thumb into the sandpaper going back and forth. You can cross hatch a little bit. Keep a really close eye on making sure it's well lubricated. Once it gets dry, you really run the risk of grabbing that material and ripping it up. Now we started to bring down the high points all over the place. Now you got to really start feeling around, because again, you don't want it to be perfect. You want it to get to the point where you can't feel too much of the ridges or too much of the texture, because then you know you'll be able to spray over it and it'll cover just fine. Also, one thing, I learned this the hard way, as you work into this little by little, make sure when you go to wipe it with your rag, you wipe it nice and carefully, because the material is starting to become a little bit more delicate, and believe me, if you go in too hard with that dry rag, you can end up damaging the Plasti Dip. All right, let's take a look at what we got. Again, wiping away nice and gently. Let the pre-dip dry. Now you can see that everything's starting to level out little by little. Let's come in. I can barely feel anything. You can see the outline of where the original ridge was, but you can't feel it. Anything that you can't feel, PDS should be able to cover. That's my rule, because you don't want to burn too deep and get into that OEM paint. This is a very delicate project. I'm going to come in just a little bit more and just see if I can get it a little bit closer, and then I'm going to go ahead and dry it off and respray. All right, been at it for a little while. I'm going to take my rag, gently wipe it down. Remember, the dip is a little bit more delicate right now, so we're going to gently wipe it down and see what we've got. Make sure you let it dry before you do a final assessment, because those wet spots can be a little bit misleading as far as when you're looking for high and low points. Okay, now, the entire area, this is where our ridge was here, above, below, and to the sides are all uniform and level now. With my fingertips, I can't feel anything. I can still identify a couple small low points. But this isn't auto paint, it's not auto clear. Now, if you're a body shop guy and you do this for a living, you might think, well, if this was paint, we'd want to make sure that this was completely flush and uniform and totally matted out and perfect. However, Plasti Dip is a little bit thicker. It has some better covering and filling properties than paint does. So it doesn't have to be perfect. And again, we're making the Plasti Dip more delicate the more that we sand, and we do not want to burn through. That pretty much completely voids the entire purpose of the repair, because we wanted to avoid peeling and respraying. So if I can't feel anything with my fingertips, what we're going to do is let this completely dry and come back in and continue our project just like if the drip never happened. If we were 4 coats into black Plasti Dip spray, what we're going to do is sand this down, make it uniform, and come now with our 5th coat of Plasti Dip spray, not change any of the spraying techniques, and hopefully our repair went well. All right, we've got our panel here. Our 5th coat of PDS black has dried. Now, you can still just barely get a glimpse of where there was a little bit of a disruption if you know what to look for. 9 people out of 10 wouldn't see anything at all, but I know exactly where it was, so I could almost see like a shadow of where it was. It's not 100% perfect. I could have gone in with the sanding a little bit more, taken a little bit more time, but if this was my car, my project, this is about where I would have taken it. Now, the one thing you have to keep in mind, as you're finishing and as you're thinking, okay, I'm done with the sanding, close your eyes and touch it one more time, all the way up and down the panel. Make sure that you can't identify any changes in the material at all. Because even if it's something as small as a swell, even if it's not a sharp ridge, even if it's a swell up and down, when you shoot it, you're going to see it. Even when I was shooting this area and it was wet, when it was soaking wet, I could see the swell of where the ridge was. As it dried, it laid out nice and smooth and leveled. But believe me, if you're going to be putting gloss over this or pearl or dip pearl top coat, you really want to make sure, if you're going to go through all the trouble of the repair, that the end result is something worth going through the trouble for. So just do one more check as soon as you think you're done to make sure there's nothing left. You want it to be nice and flat, nothing you can feel with your fingers at all. And then you can continue with your project. Now, who would have thought you can wet sand Plasti Dip? The product is a lot more versatile than most people realize. Now you know how to attack a drip or a run if you get one on your car. Now, if you happen to get one, there's no quick way out. Either you're going to peel and respray, which could be a small pain in the butt all the way to a massive one if you're using something like pearls and you need to match the panels around it, or you can take this approach, you can wet sand it, bring that product down nice, flat, and level, and continue with your project. Again, remember two things. One, make sure you give the product as much time as you can allow to dry before you go ahead and start wet sanding. 2 to 3 hours, absolute minimum, and don't try it unless you got at least 3 wet coats of PDS down on there first. You can get that sandpaper pretty much anywhere local, Pep Boys, Advanced Auto Parts, maybe even Walmart, something like that. So it will be local to where you are. If you're in the middle of a project and you need to stop and go and grab some, there will be Automotive sandpaper there for you. If you have any questions about the dipping industry, the process you saw today, or the products that we used, email CustomerService@DipYourCar.com or call in and talk to someone from our customer service team. They'll walk you through the entire process and help you out as much as they can. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. It's Fonzie. I'll see you on the next one.